Hey, what's up? This is Corey Glenn. I'm going to show in this video how I would go about doing a ditched die model for printing crown and bridge models. So this is a case I just designed for someone, 8 restorations. But one of the things about it is that the models, they had to do a lot of tissue retraction. And so there's areas where there's tissue overlaying it. And so if you wanted to have a printed model for a digital workflow that you could actually test your restorations on and maybe run them through an articulator, then you're probably going to want to ditch those models unless you want to sit there and do it by hand with a handpiece. So this to me is just an easier option. So we'll just do the lower model for an example, and then I'll actually show you too how I would mount this up digitally for my the Glen articulator that I've designed. So here we have just the lower model. This is just the preps as they came out of the scan. And so what I'm going to do is go ahead in Mesh Mixer and go to Edit, Generate Face Groups. Now the reason that I do that is because when you generate face groups, the software is looking for changes in angle on the model, okay? And when it finds those that meet a certain threshold, it's going to change that into its own face group. So notice here along gingival margins, you have this smooth mesh going into a crease, and that crease meets the threshold angle, and that changes the next portion of the mesh into a different face group or a color. And so by doing that, that just makes it where I don't have to sit here and necessarily draw all these margins. And so what I'm going to do is just click on this. Now it looks like this one in particular, there's somewhere that mesh threshold didn't, it wasn't strong enough. And so thus you can see right here, that's kind of a disappearing margin. You can't really tell where it transitions because there's not a big crease threshold. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take my select tool and I'm just going to go below my margin and just outline that. And if I push Control G, that is going to give me a new face group. So now I've broken this blue apart from this blue, and now I can hit G and it selects that entire face group. So I'm going to do that for both of my preps here, and then you will have to come back and refine this a little bit. And so I'm going to just go and select my margins, and if I have anywhere that's really hanging way below my margin, I will use the erase tool and get rid of that. Okay, and then we could go ahead and include all of this stuff as well. But my goal is I just want to select my entire prep. Okay, interproximal, he's got a well-defined margin there, so I'm going to just go ahead and include all of that. Okay, so that one's done. Let's go to this one. And again, this prep is obviously had some deep decay, so it's a bit hard to make out exactly where things should be. So I'm going to go probably a little bit beyond where the margin might be. And now we'll move to this one. And that ought to do it. Now you'll notice I didn't bother trying to get every last one of these triangles, because what I can do now that I've at least got my margin areas segmented is go ahead and just make a face group out of this. Okay, I've got this. If I hit invert, that makes a face group out of everything else. Alright, now I've still got these little triangles, but since they're not separated to this one, I do invert one more time, and now I have just my preps selected. So I'm going to go ahead and, I'm going to just select these face groups and hit B to smooth the boundary. And now I just have two distinct face groups. Okay, or well, I guess these are three different colors, but what I can do now is let's determine how big of an area we want to ditch around the models. Okay, so I'm going to select the main model, and then I'm going to contract the boundary. Now what I mean by contract the boundary is I'm going to, I've got all of this selected, and now watch what happens. I'm using the hotkey. You can do this under modify contract ring, but you see the little hotkey there, hold shift and hit your less than. And you see what happens when I do that is that my ring is contracting by one triangle in all directions each time that I do that. Okay, so I did it 5 times, and you see that has created a new boundary here. And with that done, I'm going to once again hit B for smooth boundary. And now look what we have. We have these 3 pink face groups. Okay, so what makes this process easy is the breaking it into face groups. Okay, so now I just want to select all of these. That has selected everything but the pink area, and now I'll hit invert just because that to me was easier than trying to make a small dot size and click right on that pink. And with that done, I'm going to hit T for transform, and I'm going to pull this straight down. And then if you wanted to give it a little angle, you could do that as well. And so there you see we have ditched those margins, and now that process is completed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go ahead and export this. My upper model, I had already actually done the ditching on that. You can see it here. So I'm going to export it. And finally, I'm going to do the restorations as well. Okay, and with that done, now let's go and orient this to the Glen articulator that I've made. So when this is purchased, you'll have just an overall mesh mixer file that you just open the file, and it has all of these things in it already. There's your facial planes for alignment, there's things like a coist transfer plate, and what I want to do is import those models that I just created. And now, as you can see, we have brought in our ditched models as well as the restorations. Now, first thing that you ought to notice is that these are not oriented in the same scene. Okay, and that's always going to be the case because all CAD programs have their different definitions of what's up, what's down, forward, back, all of that. And so when you bring this into the articulator file, assuming you want to align it to this so you can print your models and have them oriented properly, then the files that I brought in, I just want to control select all of them and now move them together. If you, at least in Mesh Mixer, if you move one and you don't have it moving with the others, then now you've lost their orientation to one another. Okay, so to make this a little easier, I'm going to hide the top member of the articulator here, as well as the digital mounting plates. And now we can finish aligning these. So first thing I want to do is get it oriented along the midline. Okay, so I'm looking at the midline plane here, and I can pull this over. I can look from the front and get the cant correct. Now I am doing this as an arbitrary mounting. I don't have pictures of this patient. I don't have a face bow or anything. But I can get a pretty good guesstimate by just orienting the incisal edge to the coist transfer plate. And if we bring that down now and put the occlusal plane roughly on the coist transfer plate, and then bring the incisal edge back to the same place that you would orient this in the mouth, now your models are more or less oriented. Okay, you can see midline is set. I'm looking for any canting, and it does need to come up just a little bit. Okay, so that looks good. So at a minimum, even though this is somewhat of an arbitrary mounting, at least you do have the relative distance to the joint. You know, all of this is based on the same principles as a face bow for you know, really any semi-adjustable articulator, and so that's going to put you in approximately the right position if you actually wanted to run this through excursive movements and that kind of thing. So with that done, I'm just going to turn on the digital mounting plates. Let me find where I put those. Alright, so here are your plates, and one of the nice things about this mesh mixer file is that you've already got an individual face group for this portion. So watch what I do here. I'm just going to select that, and I'm going to hit D on the keyboard, or you could go up and hit extrude, but I'm just going to extrude this upward until it just touches that model. Alright, that looks good. I'll repeat for the upper. Alright. And now as a last step, you're going to have to join this and this. Okay, so I'm going to break these apart. And now that I want to join to this. So I'm going to control select both of them. And you can do combine, but I prefer to use Boolean union. That way you don't have multiple meshes going on. We'll accept that. And then I'm going to do this and join it to the, oops, right there and there. And we'll Boolean union those. And now we have our lower model ready. Now you could probably do this in your printer software, but I would also want to hollow these models. There's no need to waste that much resin to print a couple of models. So I'll usually just do the hollow function and insert a drain hole. And now that one is hollowed. And then same thing on this one. And now your models are digitally mounted, and you could go ahead and print these, and they will drop right onto the articulator in the proper orientation. And just so you can see that in space, I'll show you here. Alright, lower model, upper model. You would simply print these, and when they come off the printer, you'll just get one of those steel washers. I put a little super glue in here, drop the washer in, and now that's going to magnetically pop on to the articulator, and your occlusion and everything should be set. And now you could even, once you get your restorations fabricated, you can even put them on here, run through excursive movements, do some of the things that the digital world is not as conducive to fine tuning for. So that's basically it. Hopefully you found that helpful. Thanks.